Chapter 2, The U.S. Economy, A Global View, Part 2. The changing mix of output. In the past 100 years, the U.S. has transformed from an agricultural society to an industry-based society, and then to a service-based society. We are a service economy. 80% of U.S. output consists of services, not goods. Even so, we still make a lot of stuff. We still make a lot of goods, but we are a service economy. I think that the discussions that have happened over the last 4, 5, 10 years about the loss of U.S. manufacturing jobs, we hear that expression from politicians all the time, that U.S. jobs are being shipped overseas. Yes, they are, and they're being replaced by service jobs, which are higher paying, which are more sustainable, which are less influenced by trends and unforeseen factors that often affect good production. Service jobs have allowed, the transition to service jobs have allowed the U.S. economy to move forward and be a strong world leader. It would seem that the more service jobs we have, the better we are. And the manufacturing jobs we have that have been over the years replaced by service jobs are probably eventually all going to go away. And so when you hear talk that we're trying to bring manufacturing jobs back here, it's an odd thing, because I find it to be a very economically uninformed opinion to want to bring back manufacturing jobs, to start making things in this country again. To use an example from the first chapter, it would be as if we were saying, well, we need to get rid of these computers and start working on typewriters again. It would be a huge step backwards to go that way. But for some reason, it's a popular thing to say, to tell people we're going to bring those manufacturing jobs back here. Well, are we going to take people out of their service jobs, which they can work in without injury, without physical fatigue in many cases, that often in these service jobs often bring with them a higher standard of living and higher pay, and we're going to replace those jobs with manufacturing jobs? It's an interesting point of view. Of course, some will say, well, those manufacturing jobs could help lower employment or unemployment numbers, so they could lower unemployment, create more jobs. Well, that could happen. But once again, as the service industry continues to increase over time, we're going to end up shipping those manufacturing jobs back overseas again when the people that were working those jobs get service jobs, and the ones who are willing to work in manufacturing jobs are requiring salaries so high that it makes the products and the companies that make the products here unviable. As a perfect example, look at the U.S. auto companies that needed government bailouts because their wage rates were so high, because we insist on trying to manufacture those cars here because we've traditionally done it. Well, other car companies are far more profitable all over the world because they produce their cars and the parts for those cars in areas where they can get the wages at a much lower rate. The manufacturing wages at a lower rate. So the more service jobs we have, the better our economy seems to do. Here's a good graph of the changing mix of output. You can see how dramatically our service jobs have increased. And then you look at manufacturing, mining, and construction. Construction is about 19% right now. Agriculture is about 1%. And service is about 80%. You will continue to see this change in time. The trend will continue, and manufacturing will decrease unless that movement to bring manufacturing here really catches on. I don't think it will, because anybody who brings manufacturing, any company that starts manufacturing here, is going to have to raise their prices, which is going to make their product undesirable, and they won't be able to compete with the companies that are manufacturing overseas. So I see this continuing, and we really are a service economy, and we need to learn to embrace it, because that transition has happened. That transition happened a long time ago. The transformation of the United States into a service economy reflects our increasing incomes. In poor countries, resources must be devoted to producing food and goods, not services. That's absolutely true. we only, as you saw in the previous graph, only 1% of our population is in agriculture, producing food right now. Of course, you do produce food outside of agriculture. I mean, there's some market for that as well, but that's a very small number. We spend a minuscule amount of our resources on food, on basic food and real basic good production. Once again, most of our economy is us serving each other. How to produce? That's the next question. How a country produces depends on what resource inputs are available. So what kind of human capital, what kind of human capital do we have? What are our people capable of doing? What's our physical capital? What is our infrastructure, facilities, tools? I would even include resources, natural resources in this. How do we leverage those to produce the best possible good? The U.S. invests heavily in human capital. The U.S. has accumulated a massive amount of physical capital. The high productivity of the U.S. economy results from using highly educated workers with high-tech equipment and capital-intensive production processes. We consume so much because we produce so much. We are a very educated, highly educated population. A large percentage of our population is educated. We have a very small class of truly poor, and we tend to work to the best of our abilities. Somebody who can do something exceptional usually does because there's a strong financial reward for doing so. Capital or labor? Richer countries tend to be capital intensive, while poorer countries tend to be labor intensive. What does it mean to be capital intensive? Where capital is abundant and relatively low cost, and labor is very expensive. People in this country aren't going to work for pennies. People in this country aren't going to pick strawberries in a field for 30 cents an hour. And so we have to find other ways to get that done. So machinery is invented for agricultural purposes because we won't do it labor-wise. We can throw money at problems to solve them instead of labor. In a labor-intensive economy, capital is unavailable or very expensive. There's just not much out there. These are very poor countries, and labor is very cheap because products are cheap, because nobody has any money, so you have to keep products cheap. Food is cheap in poor countries. Everything is cheap because nobody can afford anything. And so because everything is so cheap, people are willing to work for little because they can survive on little. And it's very difficult to change, to go from a country that's very labor intensive to one that's very capital intensive. It's very difficult because there's so many factors beyond the control of the country. I mean, in terms of resources, in terms of their political structure and so forth. Other factors: technological advancement, finding new and better ways to produce products. When technology advances, an economy can produce more output with existing resources, and its production possibility curve shifts outward. Once again, the U.S. is very strong in this way because there's a profit motive. We are motivated by profit. If you come up with a new process and you patent it, you can make a lot of money. Or you can leave your company if you come up with a new process, start your own company, use that process, and once again make a lot of money and have an even higher standard of living. So we motivate people in this country to advance the economy, to advance technology through monetary reward. Factor mobility, rapidly reallocating resources from declining industries to expanding industries. Okay, we're also very good at this. When industries are failing, we reallocate what was used to make those industries go into the new ones. IBM is a perfect example. They reallocated resources from making typewriters and other basic business machines to their computers. And they became a computer leader in the 60s, 70s, and 80s because they reallocated their resources. Outsourcing and trade. We take advantage of low opportunity costs around the world. So we can get cheap labor from other parts in the world, and we can actually support other countries and help poverty in other countries by providing jobs that wouldn't otherwise be there. And we can exploit technological advancements to use resources from around the world. We can use our technological advantages to help us take advantage of other resources. For example, in India, they have a class there of highly educated people, and they don't really have jobs for them because they're still pretty much their country. Much of their country lives impoverished. So the people that are highly educated, there's not enough services or people who can pay for services for them to get jobs. So what did we do here? We used our information technology infrastructure to use people in India with PhDs in computer science to be service tech professionals, to be customer service reps. So they'll answer the phone in India and can often help us with our technical issues here. Now, often we don't like this because there's a communication problem in many cases, but the knowledge of those folks quite often is outstanding. Next is outsourcing. U.S. workers have a comparative advantage in high-skill, capital-intensive jobs. Once again, we are a very high-skilled workforce. Workers in other countries have a comparative advantage in lower-skill, labor-intensive jobs. We do not have a population that's willing to work in a factory for 12 hours a day for $6, $3, $1 an hour. We don't have that any longer. Outsourcing flows both ways. Some jobs leaving the United States and other jobs coming to the United States. Outsourcing does flow both ways, but for the most part, we outsource our manual labor if it can be outsourced. You can't outsource ditch digging because you need the ditch dug here. But you can outsource somebody putting the leather together for a pair of Nikes, somebody assembling an iPhone. You absolutely can do that, and it helps our economy and their economy and the world economy for us to do that.